who is the tight end that you should pick up if you just lock Tucker Kraft like me on so many teams. That more to speak on the couch. So please return Dave Kluge to the couch. Dave, pain. Tucker Kraft, pain. Where's the soothing? Where's the relief? Where's the balm? There's a lot of choices on the waiver wire this week. It is tight end.
There are a lot of choices, and I don't know if any of them are going to give you Tucker Kraft production. I mean, this guy was giving us more points per game than anybody else prior to Brock Bowers' huge explosion last week. But the one guy that piques my interest, and I almost am hesitant to say this because I don't want to sound like I'm viewing this through the lens of a homer here. I am a Chicago fan, full disclosure, but Colson Loveland, we are seeing this role start to grow here. And what he did last week, 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. First rookie tight end since 1980 to have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in a single game. And sure, a lot of that came against the Bengals, and they have been very lucrative for opposing tight ends this year, giving up more fantasy points than any other team available. But even before this game, we started to read the tea leaves a little bit that he was getting more involved, and some of that came due to a Cole Kmet injury. But this is a top 10 pick who they had big expectations for. He was drafted right after a shoulder surgery where he missed OTAs, he missed minicamp, he wasn't ready for the start of training camp, picked up another injury in season. So I understand the slow start, but now we're seeing this guy start to get involved as one of the primary pass catchers in a much improved Bears offense. So I don't know if he's going to make the same ascension Tucker Kraft did and give you, overall tight end one production, but I think he very much so belongs in the streaming discussion going into next week.
Yeah, I certainly think nobody cares about your team, but I did lose Tucker Kraft like most of my teams this week. And there's the one league I'm doing stacked, the one Jeremy
Mhm.
from Reddit. Love him. Loved everything they're doing over there. What a community. Millions, literally millions over there. And I lost Tucker Kraft. I traded away George Kittle early in the year because I had Tucker Kraft.
Oh,
It's all right. I got Jonathan Taylor in the trade.
there you go.
Anyway, and there I was surprised. I was kind of depressed. I tweeted out something about like, well, if you lost Jaden Daniels, you were already getting by without him most of the year anyway. And
Mhm.
quarterback, I mean, I can name like 5 quarterbacks off the top of my head that are somebody's quarterback too that you could trade for, even if you don't like JJ McCarthy or whatever's on the waiver wire. And I was like, tight end. But then I started to look, Dave. I was like, well, actually, because there's Colston Loveland, Theo Johnson ended up pretty high on my list. If you prefer the safer PPR type play, there's Dalton Schultz. Maybe Kate Otten was dropped during his bye. There's actually a lot of names. Luke Musgrave, just go right to the replacement. We'll talk a little more
Mhm.
about that and like Green Bay while we're on this Tucker Kraft. And then I actually found because it's hard for me to let go of players. Like, I'm like, what about Isaiah Likely? I liked him.
Mhm.
Maybe I was right after all because he's coming on now. Lamar Jackson is back, and I kind of am still fascinated with Darnell Washington. Like
Mhm.
tight end in an Arthur Smith offense, snaps going up, targets going up, red zone targets going up. So I almost think uh, you I want to devote like 3 roster spots to tight end, like do a shotgun
Right.
approach. But Colston Loveland should be number 1 because of that play was galvanizing. Like you hope that he saved their season, right? He undid the Jaden Daniels Hail Mary, basically, right? It was the opposite of the Jaden Daniels Hail Mary. And we
I'll,
know,
I'll tell you this.
uh-huh.
My wife burst into tears after that
Mhm.
Colson Loveland catch and run because we've been Bears fans our whole life. Those plays, those games never break in our
Exactly.
direction. So as soon as he breaks those touchdowns, before he was even in the end zone, like he dropped his head, put it in the second gear, and I just look at my wife. She turns around, and there are just tears
Mhm.
streaming down her face because this doesn't happen to Bears fans.
Yes. Yes. A curse breaker, right?
Mhm.
And they took him over Tyler Warren because he's a better all-around player than Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren has the stuff that turns into fantasy value. So on a fantasy level, they're close to equal, if not Warren maybe being better. Who knows? But Loveland, considerable talent, and you would hope that Caleb Williams just associates him now with like good. He already was having a good game before that. He already had a touchdown. He already had 5 catches before that. So I think he's got to be the top, and then we'll see, what he does against the Giants this week. But let me ask you this: and I'm embracing this, does that mean like that this Bears passing game is now even more of a mess when we have to project it week to week?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we just saw Romadunze get no catches last week after this guy was a top 5 wide receiver through the first month of the season. So, fun for real football because the ball's getting spread all over. Ben Johnson couldn't care less what position you are. If you're a wide receiver, you're lining up in the backfield. If you're a tight end, you're going out wide. If you're out wide, you're lining up in line. I mean, he is moving guys all over the formation. It is so fun. I mean, there were 3 plays that I've never seen happen this week from the Bears playbook. Like they're doing fun things, but for fantasy, yeah, it is a huge headache. So I think that you're putting Roma Dunze in and hoping that he can score those big touchdowns. I mean, he's been a first down machine. Almost every one of his catches this year has gone for a first down. He's got that deep A dot. He's got the big play upside. But now we're seeing DJ Moore get a little bit more involved. It's a lot of the gimmicky stuff near the line of scrimmage, touches out of the backfield, but that plays in fantasy as well. Colson Lovell is in there. So I think this is one of those, the ball gets spread so thin, but every player every single week has week winning upside. So I think you just need to keep going back to it. For what we do from a projection standpoint, yeah, it is hair pullingly frustrating. But for fantasy managers, I think you just keep putting the guys in your lineup and hoping that it's the week that the ball goes in their direction.
Yeah, and hope that Caleb Williams plays well, which hasn't always been a given.
Mhm.
And then there's also this other angle we can talk about Kyle Monangai and how now you have a David Montgomery kind of pair with. I mean, they really can have an inside-outside running game now, just like what Ben Johnson had with Gibbs and Montgomery. And unfortunately, for the purposes of projecting the passing game week to week, like for instance, this week against the Giants is a good example. If we expect the Bears to be able to control the game, now they probably want to run the ball like 35 times anyway and only pass like 25 times. So it's even harder. And Luther Burden's going to come back from his concussion, and Olamide Zacchaeus isn't going away. Caleb
Right.
Williams, like those are layups for him. He likes that. So you're right that it's Roma Dunze. Like what I'm bracing myself for is Dave. Like the questions, like is it time to bench Roma Dunze? You know, in your fantasy league, you're right. The problem is, and you make the perfect sound you're like, but I might be telling you to bench like a 100-yard, 2-touchdown game based on what we've seen earlier this year. And that again, if Caleb Williams is playing well, I'm into that. And we'll just see how much the Bengals inflationary effect. Like there's like one of the things that happened this year in fantasy a lot, Dave, is like bad, terrible defenses have created this
Mhm.
illusion of value. Like the Jets offense in week one, like, oh, Justin Fields and Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson. And no, it's just the Steelers were terrible. Even the Packers, right? The Packers pass offense, boom, boom, boom against the Steelers. And then the next week against the Panthers, they can't do anything. And then the Steelers put the clamps on the Colts, which is why what we do, Dave, my newest thing is like our actual job is sitting in the dunk tank. We're just letting people we're just letting people dunk us because we're doing something that's silly and impossible. Um,
I mean, all year we see the Dolphins are just a run funnel. Every single team is just making the Dolphins look like a pee-wee football team out there. And then the Falcons set up for a smash spot. Bijan Robinson can't get anything
yeah,
going. Like
yeah,
that is us falling into the dunk tank because all of us were saying Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, fire up all your Falcons. This is a great matchup. And what happens? They can't get anything going against a team that every team has beat
right.
this year.
Right. There's bipolar teams, and I'm allowed to say that because I've bipolar in my family and probably have a touch of it myself. No, there really are teams. You know, there's variance, Dave, and then
Mhm.
the phrase I've always used over the years to describe it is if you like you would swear it can't be the same players. The uniforms are the same, numbers are the same, but it cannot be the same players you watched last week. It just can't be. You know, and I think football is an emotional game, and then there's also matchups where it's almost like oh man, was there like a Jackie Chan movie where like there were all these different kung fu's of different animals? You know, like I've got tiger kung fu, or I've got crane kung fu, or I know that Mr. Miyagi taught like the crane, and it's almost like you
Mhm.
know when you think about nature and the like, there's some animals like you match it up with this fierce animal, and it's going to have the right strategies and tools to beat that animal, but another animal is going to like slit its throat right away, right? And these teams, the way their modes of attack and defense match up sometimes can be disastrous. And then in a given game, it can have this feedback effect loop where a team just gets like discouraged or an injury takes the wind out of their sails. So it's silly that we're even trying to predict this stuff. But with that in mind, Dave, what can we predict for the Green Bay offense? Because Tucker Kraft is a consequential player, not just, and maybe not even the passing game isn't the most important. He's an
Mhm.
amazing blocker, right? And we saw when George Kittle came back, like, ooh, yay, George Kittle's going to put up fantasy numbers. Yes, but for Christian McCaffrey, like they became a ball control team because George Kittle moves guys, Tucker Kraft moves guys. What's going to happen in Green Bay?
And I'm glad you mentioned that because I really think that is the secret sauce to what makes Tucker Kraft so good is that he is such a good blocker. And then when he gets these play action plays, you see it all the time. Like, a tight end comes off the line on a play action, just kind of like throws a quick elbow and then runs out to the flat. Tucker Kraft would get underneath his defender, like shove him back 3 yards and then release and get out to the flat. And that's why they never saw it coming because like
Yeah.
he was just manhandling guys in the blocking game. And that's what allowed him to get so open in the passing game. I don't think you can replicate what he did. I mean, unless they go out and they trade for George Kittle right now, I don't think they're getting the same production from Tucker Kraft anywhere else. I do like Luke Musgrave a lot. I want to say that. And the Packers like him a lot too. He was drafted in 2023 ahead of Tucker Kraft. If you look just at the raw athletic numbers, Luke Musgrave is a better athlete than Tucker Kraft, or at least was when they did these measurements in a random 2023 April day. Tucker Kraft at this point has developed into just a great running or a tight end, but I still think that there's some stuff here with Luke Musgrave that hasn't really been tapped into yet because Tucker Kraft has been so good and Luke Musgrave has just been downtrodden with injuries for the first 2 years of his career. I do want to see what he can do with some of these similar looks where they can get him out in space in the flat, when they can hit him on these deep posts, these deep crossers, where Tucker Kraft was able to make plays after the catch. So the way I spun it, Alfredo and I talked about this on our show earlier today. I said there's no one-to-one replacement, but it might be like an 8 to 10 replacement where you're getting like 80% of Tucker Kraft from Luke Musgrave. And that alone is still enough to potentially be a back end tight end one.
Yeah, well, and so, so here's the way I'll set up this question, Dave.
Mhm.
Um, Now, in so much as there was a negative case on Tucker Kraft coming into the season, it was meager targets in wide target tree and variance, right? And even
Mhm.
though Tucker Kraft was a guy that could create big plays and score touchdowns, a lot of people saw that variance and stayed away. Now, Luke Musgrave should be, at least on first glance, subject to the same caveat. However, he's not Tucker Kraft as a blocker, and he's a vertical tight end.
Mhm.
He's a speed tight end. And you're right. I mean, people should know that Luke Musgrave in that very good class of tight ends was most people considered him the best athlete. Like just I mean, from a pure athleticism standpoint, and also a player. I think he was banged up going into the draft process, and they're like, well, if he was healthy, he might have been a first round pick. Uh, and he hasn't necessarily not popped because he's a bust. Just Tucker Kraft happened. So it's going to be interesting. It is so wild, by the way, that there's this pattern that when teams take two tight ends in the same draft, the second one's always better. It's the
Mhm.
Ravens have done it like 3 times. Just the Ravens alone have done it. Anyway, not getting into some of the weird like coincidences, like numerology or draftology or something. But could it possibly be, Dave, that no, it's not going to be that way for Luke Musgrave because this offense, and this could have implications for Romeo Dobbs, could have implications for Christian Watson. I think that it has negative implications for Josh Jacobs. This offensive line, this is being glossed over because the team is winning, but the Packers offensive line have had injuries, and they're
Mhm.
not playing great football. So, is it possible we could see this team have to really turn to Jordan Love as the main engine for the offense in the second half of the year?
Which they should. They paid him like a top 5 quarterback, and we've seen that, like, on the rare occasion that they give him a long leash and they let him go out there and play a little bit loose, he can play some good football. It might come with some turnovers here and there, but I think he is a good quarterback, so I'd like to see it go his way a little bit more. And you briefly mentioned Christian Watson, but I think he probably is the biggest beneficiary here because Tucker Kraft was their big play guy. Christian Watson can do that as well, and so much of his targets so far this year have come deep downfield, but we have seen him earlier in his career where they can use him in kind of a pseudo DK Metcalf type of role where they
Mhm.
hit him on those short crossers and let him create after the catch. So I'd like to see some more of that go in Christian Watson's way as well. I got to be honest, I didn't really think about how much the run game would be impacted, but you do make a good point there. There are so many times where they are running to Tucker Kraft's side of the ball because he's able to seal that edge, and you're not going to get that from Luke Musgrave. So John Fitzpatrick, I think, is more of their blocking tight end. He might get some of that work near the line of scrimmage, but if we do see Luke Musgrave playing in this more vertical route or this vertical role, like you talked about, I do wonder if we start seeing Christian Watson getting some of those layups that were going Tucker Kraft's direction. He can't break tackles the same way, but he does have the speed that he can take a little play, catch from the line of scrimmage, and create after that.
Yeah, these are the right questions to ask. I mean, just like when we're going into the season, like we have our stances, but really we're flexible and we're open for the action to teach us like how it's going to happen. But let's make our minds open and think about these possibilities. We have some possibilities, Dave, as we speak, turning into realities at the trade deadline, and at least some fantasy relevant things to talk about, instant reaction kind of stuff as we're countdown to the trade deadline. So we already saw Jacoby Myers get dealt this morning, and it I joked that the Jags receivers since like Thursday have just been the true roller coaster ride.
Hmm.
The terror of Travis Hunter's injury, twists like Giammi Brown banged up and Brian Thomas banged up, and then actually Jacoby Myers is going to join the team, which and I was really thinking of this from like a Trevor Lawrence value point of view because 24 hours ago I said, geez, like Parker Washington and what even isn't that's not going to get it done. But now you have Travis Hunter maybe back for the end of the season and Jacoby Myers, and you can talk about either side or both sides, like what's left behind him with the Raiders, uh, what he's going to with the Jags. What were your thoughts when you saw this go down?
I think this is mutually beneficial for both sides, and you don't see that often with trades. A lot of times you see teams just blowing it up, trying to tear it down, and getting really good players. But I think that there are some good players right now that haven't really been given the ability to shine in Las Vegas because Jacoby Myers is there, and he's a good player, and he's going to get a full allotment of snaps, and he's going to draw targets. Jack Besh is the guy that I am excited about that should be able to step into this role, who hasn't really done much this year, but now at least they'll get an honest opportunity to evaluate him, see how his skill translates to the NFL. We also saw last week that there was a lot of Michael Mayer involvement, even with Brock Bowers out there. So I think the Raiders now are going to do the same thing that we're seeing so many teams do in today's NFL, which is just play out of base 12 personnel, where you can create these mismatches on the defense. You can run the ball, you can pass the ball, you can counter whatever the defense is doing. So I think we're going to see a lot more heavy sets going forward in Las Vegas, pushing Michael Mayer probably not into like the weekly top 12 discussion, but probably into that streamer. I mean, we saw he was just short of a huge touchdown last week. He was way more involved than I expected with Brock Bowers back. So I think Jack Bash, Mike Mayer, those are kind of the risers over there in Vegas. Jacksonville, I don't really know yet. I think what this tells me is that Brian Thomas Jr.'s ankle injury is probably more serious than we're led to believe. Liam Cohen is always very tight-lipped when it comes to injuries. He's not going to say anything until he has to on Wednesday's practice. So we'll hope for more information there. But I think Brian Thomas Jr. is probably going to miss some time. Travis Hunter's already on IR. He's going to miss some time. And I think this just gives them somebody else opposite Parker Washington, because Parker Washington's been good this year, but so much of his value has come when he's been playing in the slot. Jacoby Myers is solely playing in the slot. So now I worry that this pushes Parker Washington out wide in this offense, which isn't a very good role for fantasy. And we just see Jacoby Myers kind of being the only guy that's given us fantasy value.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how quickly. There's always that variable, Dave, when wide receivers get traded in season of the chemistry and the role and the fit, and it's a bit of an unknown. And generally, I think we can always harken back to like Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins last year, like bet the under, right? When
Hmm.
wide receiver, but because of the injuries, and I did just see to add to the picture, and like you said, who knows? But Adam Schefter said that Brian Thomas has was it the low grade high ankle sprain or something. I don't know, but
Low high ankle sprain, not the
right,
high low ankle sprain. That's
exactly.
way better.
Yeah, I mean, so we'll see. It's not like Brian Thomas has been that impactful anyway. And Travis Hunter, he'll miss the games on IR and will come back, but there will be, Jacoby Myers. It does seem like Trevor Lawrence has done more with more reliable short and intermediate range receivers than the downfield receivers, and Myers fits that role. And I like Besh too. I like him a lot. Um, but Eric McFadden, who covers the Raiders, immediately mentioned Mayer. And so you were right to bring him up, even if it doesn't necessarily result in a lot of extra fantasy relevance for Mayer, but it could. And maybe even Geno Smith. I just as like something to file away. I said on the waiver wire show, hey, Geno Smith when Brock Bowers is healthy, has actually put up big numbers, like 360, something like that in week one, and then 4 touchdowns last week. And we didn't think of the Jags as a bad pass defense coming into week 9. So just, put a pin in that. But Mayer is an interesting guy, and hopefully it helps Ashton Genty. They said they said they ran the most 12 personnel all year this past week. Now, Genty only had 13 for 42, but maybe something could get going. Another trade, and I just like anytime we can talk about Rashid Shaheed because for fantasy he's kind of like on the fringe, but he's so good. And anytime we see these undrafted players, like I feel like we need to take moments out, like Jalen Warren. When you're undrafted, and everybody can probably relate to this at some point in their life. Like the universe is telling you, like, nope, you're not. Like you don't have what it takes. And all of these players have to have some sort of unerring self belief. Like at some point, like to the point where like the kind of self belief, Dave, that can be detrimental. You know what I mean? Like, where you're wasting time. Like you should move on. And then they're like, I mean, like James Harrison was released like 4 times, right?
Hmm.
So I love that Rashid Shaheed, and he actually drew a 4th and a 5th round pick. And let me say that about Myers and Shaheed, by the way, especially with Myers in a walk year. You know, I'm not sure which I should know Shaheed's contract status, but I know that he's not like I know they just signed him to an extension. But anyway, my point is, so a 4th round pick is actually pretty reasonable compensation. Like that's a 4th round. You want to hold on to your 4th round picks in the NFL draft for an NFL team. So to give up a 4th and a 5th for Shaheed tells me that Seattle, they have plans, and like you picked up right away. This is a reunion.
100%. Yeah, I mean, Clint Kubiak, we saw him getting the best from Shaheed last year, and that's why I was so excited about Jackson Smith-Njigba, because if you look historically, the X receiver in these Clint Kubiak offenses just smash year after year after year. Brandon Ayuk, his best season ever came when Clint Kubiak was in San Francisco. Justin Jefferson, his big breakout year came with Clint Kubiak last year, whether it was Chris Olave early in the year, Rashid Shaheed in the middle of the year, or Marquez Scantling late in the year. All of these X receivers have just crushed. Now, I don't think that he's going to come in here and take that from Jackson Smith-Njigba. He is worthy of that role, but this gives them another explosive element there. And I looked it up while you were talking. This is the last year of Shaheed's
Okay.
contract as well. So I assume that they do have some plans to try to re-sign him after giving up that sort of draft capital. I don't think they're just trading away draft picks to get a half-year rental of Rashid Shaheed. But I wrote about the Seahawks at length last night. The article just published this morning, and just looking at what Seattle has done over the last few years, so many of the moves that they have made have been, just met with people throwing tomatoes at what they're doing. Like I remember there was so many people upset when Russell Wilson was traded away, and when Pete Carroll was fired, and when they moved on from Geno Smith. And it doesn't matter. Every single one of these big impactful moves that they've made every offseason has improved the team's record, and now they have all of the pieces in play that they need. You look back at the draft this year, it was so intentional with them getting Robbie Oots, the kind of Kyle Juszczyk type of guy that can move all over the formation. And they've got Elijah Arroyo now, the seam busting tight end that can be that complement to AJ Barner. Like they built an offense around what they need for or for Clint Kubiak. And I think one thing that they didn't have was a steady, reliable wide receiver too. Torrey Horton could come in for his big plays. Cooper Cup is kind of a pseudo tight end at this point in his career, but now I think they finally have a legitimate downfield threat opposite Jackson Smith-Njigba. And to me, this just tells me that the Seahawks are believing themselves. They're pushing the chips in. They think they can take down the NFC West this year, and they should.
And why stop there? I mean, the NFC is wide open. You know,
Yeah. Hmm.
the NFC it isn't like the AFC where it's like you got to go through Mahomes and Lamar and Josh Allen. I mean, NFC is wide open. Um,
Do you
so
think
go ahead.
plus or minus for Shaheed? Would you say this is like better or worse for him? Because we did see like he was getting a lot of targets from Tyler Shuck,
Yeah,
and it's a bad offense, but a lot of good game scripts. The Seattle offense is fun, but outside of a handful of games, it's been a pretty low volume passing attack. So I think this is another one of those, like we were talking about the Bears, all of these fun
hmm
weapons on the offense. It's great for real life football, kind of a headache for fantasy. I feel like that's kind of where we're
yeah.
headed with Seattle's offense now.
But well, in the passing game,
Right.
outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba, it might be difficult. However, we should still allow for that hyper efficiency that we saw for the first 2 games with Shaheed and Kubiak in New Orleans. Remember, they're the best
Mhm.
offense in the world in the history of football for 2 games. But because of that, Shaheed doesn't need a lot of targets. Sam Darnold, and that's one of the things I was going to want to talk about before this trade even happened, is like, wow, Sam Darnold. Wow. Because it's not just Minnesota, and maybe Minnesota shouldn't feel bad. We'll talk about that too. But a lot of teams could have signed Sam Darnold. A lot of teams could have signed Sam Darnold this offseason. He was not really wanted, uh, even though until those last 2 games,
Hmm.
And it's those perceptions that die hard, right? Because the the Lions basically unmasked him. Oh, you can get him to get his process sped up by pressure, and then he sees ghosts, right? So I was a little bit skeptical because also it was the offensive line issues for Seattle, and it seemed like Geno Smith was doing his best to keep troopering on in a tough situation, pass blocking wise. But then you talk about other things like Seattle did something similar. They didn't trade away Laramie Tunsil, but they fired the offensive coordinator, they fired the offensive line coach,
Hmm.
and they said, even 1 year in continuity, schmontinuity, we're going to bring in Clint Kubiak. And like you said, commit. Even the reports out of training camp were the focus of training camp is installation of this running game, right? So, yeah, what's Sam Darnold going to do? He's like a caretaker. Like you said, the pass attempts are low in this offense, but he has just been hyper efficient. And like you said, that's been without a real number two receiver. So Sam Darnold could be interesting if you just lost Jaden Daniels, and he's somebody's quarterback too, probably. He might be cheaper than you think. And the spike weeks, I mean, he had a spike half. He had 4 touchdowns in a half, and it's
Right.
Washington, but that's not easy without someone like Rashid Shaheed. But what I wonder, Dave, and where I'm going with this is now the boxes are going to get lighter. Kenneth Walker.
Oh gosh, I hope so. I mean, the thing I almost feel like the reason they see these heavy boxes though is because of the personnel that they put out there. That's the way that the defense reacts to it when they're running 22 personnel and 13 personnel, and they've got these jumbo packages with multiple tight ends and running backs out there. The defense pulls all of their guys down, and that's why it allows for the big shots behind the defense. So this is really a pick your poison type of thing. Like, do you want to just sell out to stop the run? You can do that, and that's what a lot of teams have chosen to do. But then you better watch out for Torrey Horton and Jackson Smith and Jigba and now Rashid Shaheed when they get behind you. And if you want to do that, where you want to just play back in this too high shell coverage and try to stop the big play, you can do that. But they can eat you up underneath with these targets as well, and they can get the run game going. So I want to believe for Ken Walker, I really do. But I think there's a symbiotic relationship here. And if you're looking at the efficiency numbers for both running backs, I know so many people can't stand Zach Charbonnet, but I still think that he is another one of these guys that's better for real life football than he is for fantasy. And I don't think his role is going to go away because he is better between the tackles. He's better at mitigating losses. Kenneth Walker has the big play upside. And if you're looking at the yards after contact per attempt and the rushing yards over expectation and all of those fun efficiency numbers, Kenneth Walker is going to clear, but Zach Charbonnet can still be a guy who can move the chains and he doesn't take the losses that Kenneth Walker does. So I think a lot of people are hoping that Kenneth Walker is just going to run away with this backfield. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to keep seeing this 60-40, 55-45 type of split. But I think that having a secondary threat out there in the game could open things up a little bit for Kenneth Walker to hit some of those big plays. I, I think Clint Kubiak, though, just gets frustrated with the play style from Kenneth Walker. I think Carroll was willing to live with the losses, knowing that the big plays were coming. And you see it all the time that Kenneth Walker does one of these plays where he cuts back field and then he misses his, opportunity to get upfield, ends up losing a few yards. He immediately gets pulled off the field. So I think that's the difference here is that Kenneth Walker, we know he's a good player. I just don't think that Clint Kubiak is giving him the opportunities he needs to get into a rhythm.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of things to tease out there, but like you said, with a running back like Walker, it's like we saw this with Kyle Monangai last week, and this is like Rico Dowdle to a T. Like you want to let him. It's almost like a boxer, like let him go to work on the body, and then eventually they'll hit the knockout punch for you. And
Imagine if they pulled Adrian Peterson every time he took a loss, because that's what
right,
he do. He'd
right, right.
lose yards, and then rip off
Right.
an 80 yarder.
Right. I look at Walker as a guy to try to trade for this week. First of all, because his production, if you just look at it, this is where I mean, this kind of approach to fantasy football can be exploited, right? When you just look at Kenneth Walker's game logs for the last 5 weeks. Dave, he's like running back 38. He's scoring the same as Alvin Kamara. Like people are saying, do we drop Alvin Kamara? That's the same level that Kenneth Walker's been scoring at. But you have some outs here, right? So you're right. It might just stay 60-40 and a choppy rhythm for Walker to not really get into those week winning games. But just if this offense gets more efficient and better, which, I mean, the addition of Rashid Shaheed is not going to be trivial because we know the tactical value of deep speed. Then it becomes closer to like a Montgomery Gibbs kind of, there's that much production like this is the pie becomes bigger, more touchdown opportunities. Sam Darnold threw 4 touchdowns against Washington, and maybe there's a Zach Charbonnet take here too. Although know that the snap share, like Walker was up to 57%, and Charbonnet
Mhm.
was down to 42%. And Rico Dowdle does give us another out, maybe more remote, that Walker just makes so many impact plays that hopefully the bye gave him some rest. His foot feels okay. Defenses are a little bit on their heels now. And then those plays make it so that, kind of like Dave Canales said about Dowdle, like you just can't ignore it. Um, and then there's always the possibility of an injury to one or the other. Like I'm telling people, get in on the Seattle running backs right now because
Yep.
either one can be a league winner. And unfortunately for Walker, it's more likely that Charbonnet would be the league winner if that, but either way, like get in on Seattle. And I think you also did a fantastic job, Dave, setting up this sort of either or thing, or if you say like, nah, the running game is just going to kind of stay in the doldrums, then get in on Darnold. Jeez, like get
Right.
get get in on him now. He's going to have a run like what Matthew Stafford's been doing, and I think you can say something similar about Detroit because Detroit's going to have a bunch of indoor games now. I think you're going to see that offense ramp up, and it's either going to be David Montgomery or Jamison Williams. What do you think about that?
Ooh, David Montgomery or Jamison Williams. I mean, we saw both of them last week. We saw Gibbs was kind of a non-factor in this game. He kind of got phased out. We saw one good drive from David Montgomery, and that was pretty much it for Jameer Gibbs. Jamison Williams, though, I think is the guy. Like we know what David Montgomery can do, and I think as long as Jameer Gibbs is healthy, we're never going to see him in a role more than 60% of the snaps. He'll have that occasional game where he gets 60%, likely going to float around 30 to 40%. But Jamison Williams is the one that I just had faith in the Lions to do some self scouting over the bye because this is a guy who was great last year. I mean, like just short of 1,000 yards, had his big breakout season. They rewarded him with an $80 million contract and then a non factor through the first 6 weeks of the season, first 8 weeks of the season. I mean, we'd see a handful of targets here and there, but we know that he brings an explosive element to this offense. And when there's no threat of that, then the same way we were talking about with Seattle, they can just pull the defense down a little bit. They can get heavier boxes, and it starts impacting the efficiency everywhere else. So, again, last week we didn't see it in the first half, but it's like in the second half of the game, they just remembered they had Jameson Williams, started targeting him the ball, and he makes one of the best plays I've seen of the year where he's tiptoeing on the sideline, extending, getting the touchdown. So I want to have faith in Jameson Williams just because I want to bet on a young top 10 talent who showed the promise last year, should still be ascending at this point in his career. I think looking at what we saw before the bye, I shouldn't do this, but I'm just kind of ignoring it
Yeah,
and hoping that it was a fluke, that this is a first year offensive coordinator, first year play caller. He's still learning some things. And I think that time to step back, get a week off, look back at the film, see what's working, what doesn't. I have faith in them going forward to say, yeah, that's right. We've got Jamison Williams here. And when he can get going, it opens everything up for the rest of the offense as well.
and that's what I mean. John Morton said, Dave, as a fantasy analyst, that you back a player, you have a player on your team. You might think about like times in your relationship where your loved one, your partner, says like, "I'm sorry, you were right. I'm sorry," and you just feel this sense of relief. That's what John Morton said. I mean, he said, "I think
I have failed
I
you.
have failed you." Yeah,
Yes.
that's what he said. So, I mean, if you want, you cannot have a more affirmative. What's up, Greg Branos, Coach Peak Index? Like affirmative, saying like I was wrong. Like everything we were watching, we were assessing it correctly. Like they're not doing a good enough job. And he's saying I'm going to try to do it. And at least for 1 week, it came through. So yeah, Jameson Williams. And sometimes in fantasy football, and I'm probably influencing this in a bad way because I'm a prisoner of the moment. I mean, come on, we're here to entertain. We're in the dunk tank. And sometimes in fantasy football, we get worked up about stuff in the preseason, draft season, Dave. And one of them was like Jameson Williams, his route tree is getting expanded. Like you said, they gave him the contract. Like they fully believe him and buy into him. Like he's going to turn this more into a 1A, 1B kind of thing.
Mhm.
And a lot of people got Amon-Ra St. Brown like near the end of the first round, even early second round, in part because of this idea that, well, Jameson Williams can even take on more. And then it was less somehow, and maybe it's going to happen. It's just going to be a little bit delayed. There's some stuff that you weren't wrong, but you have to be patient. There's a Garcia Hunter line. Time is a stripper doing it just for you. Sorry, Joe. So sometimes fantasy football can seem so just distraught, but sometimes if you're patient, sometimes you find out you were right. Are people that were patient with JJ McCarthy going to find out that they were right?
I think it's way too early to make any declarative statements about JJ McCarthy. And I know that's what we're supposed to do here is like, have a take on every single player. But I thought it was kind of crazy that people were already just like so declarative on who JJ McCarthy was and would be for the rest of his career after 8 quarters of football. I think he's good. And full disclosure, I feel like I need to get this out there. He was my most drafted quarterback this year because I just look at the situation. I look at Kevin O'Connell, what he has done historically with quarterbacks. I look at Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and Aaron Jones and all of the pass catchers here. And then I look at JJ McCarthy, a young player with rushing upside. It's so hard not to be allured by what he can do out there. So I don't have a strong take as to like whether he's good or whether he's bad. I just think that this is a lesson in everybody learning to exercise a little bit of patience with these guys. There was so much talk about whether he was benched, whether he was injured, whatever it was. And I was asking that. Sig, we had a
Yeah.
little conversation in base camp where I said, I'm starting to believe some of the soft benching rumors that were flying around, regardless of whether it was that he was benched or that he just needed a couple of games to sit back and watch from the sideline, or his ankle really was bothering him. I don't think it matters. I have faith in Kevin O'Connell to just develop these quarterbacks. We've seen him do it time and time again. And I think JJ McCarthy now, he's got 2 division wins. He beat the Bears. He beat the Lions. Those are teams that a lot of other quarterbacks have struggled to beat so far. So now I think he's going to have a little bit of confidence going forward. Still very much so in on JJ McCarthy. I think it's tough to move him too high up in the rankings right now and say that he's like a must start, get him in your lineup, but definitely a guy that I am picking up in leagues where he was available, stashing and waiting to see how this plays out because the upside, if he ends up hitting his eye and range of outcomes, is being a league winning quarterback.
Yeah, we don't want to forget that the glass half full take for McCarthy, regardless of what you felt about him as a talent and whether it was wise for them to take him, was just Kevin O'Connell creates fantasy value in his quarterbacks and gives them good structure and support. And I was unsure because of the way that that O'Connell said that he was building him from the foundation up. And also, there were just stretches. I mean, Dave, there were just some stretches in those first 2 games where it just looked like he's just not ready. And the way O'Connell was talking about him, it was like, well, O'Connell can see that. Like O'Connell's looking at him, he's like, oh man, he's not ready, and he's trying to delay it, right? Like you're putting it was easy to put the pieces together. You're putting poor old Carson Wentz out there who's taking all this punishment because JJ McCarthy's not ready. And then I have a lot of tough games coming up. So, you look at Minnesota's schedule and they did it against Detroit. A defense that was, kind of playing over its head with a bunch of backups. But now he's going to face Baltimore. We'll see. Chicago, again, the defense that kind of terrorized him for 3 quarters. And then Green Bay. Is that the Green Bay defense good? I know it's in Lambeau, though. And then Seattle. And again, by the way, just quickly on Seattle, they also got Devon Witherspoon. Oh, that kind of matters. They got him back. And yeah, I mean, this team looks they look really good on both sides of the ball right now, at least. So with McCarthy, at the very least, I was thinking in these games, if McCarthy's not ready, Dave, and he's having to like try to come back from deficits, because the Minnesota defense also looked terrible against the Chargers. I don't know what happened. Um, that could get uncomfortable, and kind of damage his development. But after last week, and sure enough, Detroit did like what they did to Darnold last year. I mean, they threw like imagine like taking players in catapults or trebuchets. Is that what they're called? And like just
Yep.
just like flinging them at the quarterback. I mean, Detroit was doing that and then was working. I mean, they were getting home, and McCarthy hung tough. And he made the plays when he needed to make the plays.
And I think
So
that's the biggest thing.
yeah,
Yeah, like there were ups and downs in that game. It was far from a perfect game. There was a botch snap, there were sacks, there were miscues. He completed 56% of his passes. But like you said, he made plays when he needed to make plays. When the game's on the line and Jalen Naylor is covered on a fade route, he dropped that ball in a bucket and sealed the game right there. He was able to hit the 2 touchdown passes on the 2 opening drives. So to me, like there's going to be ups and downs. And he looked like a quarterback getting his 3rd NFL start. It wasn't perfect, but he was able to step up in big moments. And to me, that just gets his confidence rolling going into these next games.
and Kevin O'Connell calling the pass on that 3rd down. When I think someone did a breakdown, like the tendencies are that a team's just in a neutral looking at it without any other information. They're not going to call that pass in that
hmm
situation. and then he did, and like you said, it forced McCarthy to make a high degree of difficulty play, and he made it. That has a feedback loop effect, and I think that O'Connell understands that you have to give him a chance to fail if you're going to actually build his confidence. So I'm just going to be really fascinating to watch him and Lamar Jackson go at it, and then there's implications for any number of players, especially Aaron Jones, who got hurt and left the game and may or may not play, but looked great before he left the
Yeah.
game and was the clear lead back. So he's kind of a sneaky potential league winner if he can actually stay healthy, keep that role, and produce like that. And McCarthy can be playing like that. And that's a lot of ifs, but he's cheap. He's probably like dirt cheap in your league right
He's
now.
probably free
Um,
in most leagues right now.
yeah,
He's probably on waivers, and I don't even think you need to put a dollar on him. I think you could just kinda throw that $0 bid and just pick him up.
yeah, it's a really tough week on the waiver wire running back wise. But if somebody was frustrated because Aaron Jones got hurt, and it's also you can make like a minor trade. You never know. Last thing I want to touch on is like just a topic I wanted to make sure to get your take on while we have the wonderful couch listeners and viewers here. How important is it that Joe Alt is out for the year? Because when he wasn't out there, the Chargers offense started to struggle, and he's not going to be out there. I say, okay, when they fell behind Indianapolis, Justin Herbert lit it up, just trying to, come back. But otherwise, should we be changing our outlooks for our Chargers in the wake of this injury?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't want to say that because the Chargers have been a fun team this year. They've got all of the pieces on offense, but losing Rashawn Slater, that's a high hurdle to overcome, and they were able to do it. But I think having no Slater and no Alt, that's just too much. And I mean, we saw through the first 4 weeks when Joe Alt was healthy, like this was the best offense in football, and then sputtered dramatically as soon as they lost Joe Alt. And then Joe Alt comes back and they're immediately a good offense again. So it helps the running game, it helps the passing game. I think if there is a silver lining to try to take from this situation, it's that they're probably going to be in positions where they have to throw more often late in the game. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of situations where Justin Herbert's just out in the fourth quarter, where Keenan Allen is playing a quarter of the snaps because they've just got the game in the bag. So I think for the pass catchers here, for Lad McConkey, Quentin Johnson, Aronde Gadsden, Keenan Allen, there's some silver lining here that there might just be more volume overall. But for Chargers fans, this is devastating. I don't know how to put a good spin on this outside of the handful of people who are managing the receivers here in charge. Like, even if you've got Omari Hampton, you've been
Yeah,
so
yeah.
excited for him to come back. Even his outlook is now diminished without Joe Alt out there. So there are a small handful of tackles that make this much of an impact. Maybe two or three of them, and Joe Alt is definitely one.
Yeah, and we got to watch too that Herbert doesn't start taking too many hits, because that's what happened when Alt went out, and then the Chargers made adjustment to the quick passing game to,
Mhm.
and like you said, the volume could help balance out the loss of efficiency, but at the same time, and that won't matter if Herbert's hurt, or just playing hurt, like last year, like playing through some pretty gnarly injuries. But it, like you said, it's mostly sad, not just for Chargers fans, just for fans of football played at a high level and wanting to see like finally maybe a Chargers Herbert team that could make a little noise against that Allen, Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. It's very much harkens back to the Brady and Manning and Roethlisberger days. Flacco got in
So do
there
you think this
once. Go ahead.
Does this benefit Lad McConkey then, I'd imagine? Because you mentioned that, like, the shorter kinda dink and dunk that they went to without Alt, the numbers back it up. Through the first 3 weeks, Justin Herbert, average pass was going 9 plus yards
Yeah,
downfield, and then without Alt, it was 3, 4, 5
yeah,
yards downfield, and that's when we saw McConkey kinda break out. So, we were probably a little overzealous through the first month of the season, saying, like, Quentin Johnson's the wide receiver 1, and I wonder now if that flips back where McConkey's the guy, and now Quentin Johnson falls back into this. Like, if he scores a touchdown, great, but I don't know if there's going to be the downfield volume there that we saw.
yeah, and maybe Aronde Gadsden too. I mean, there's just like a comfort level with the way that he's executing. You can tell
Mhm.
that Herbert, and he's getting the ball to him early in the game. So Gadsden's one
Yep.
of those guys. Like, speaking of the Tucker Kraft teams, like my team, like maybe if Gadsden's a tight end too for a team, like make an offer there, as somebody might. be willing to
The last thing else, so
yeah.
many people
Mhm.
that have good tight ends have 2 good tight ends
Sure.
too, because Brock Bowers got hurt in week 1,
Right.
George Kittle got hurt in week 1, and all
Mhm.
of those guys went to the waiver wire and they picked up the Trey Terrence
Right.
or the Jake Fergusons
Right,
and, like,
right,
all
right.
these breakout guys. So there is a very active trade market for tight ends in a lot of fantasy leagues right now.
Yeah, I try not to. I really don't want to mention the Chinese farmer every week, but there is that Chinese farmer parable thing with fantasy football where it's like, oh, George Kittle hurt, that's bad. No, actually, I picked up Ronnie Gatson. Oh, that's good. Like just that's how it goes. But it's oh, Joe Burrow got hurt. I have Jamar Chase. That's bad. Oh, they traded for Joe Flacco. That's good. It's just how it goes, and you have to stay nimble and do your best. I was saying, I've been updating this because love of my life, Kate. Uh, she's doing an office league with a dentist that she works with, right? And it's the first time she's done like actual fantasy football. We did DFS lineup. She was really good at it, better than me often. Around the time that Philip Lindsay was going off, um, and uh, and she's learning up front. Like she loves puzzles. She loves attacking these things, and she's like, oh, when you only have 10 teams in a fantasy football league, everybody has good players. Yeah, that's why we want to go with 12 teams. And she's just seeing that fantasy football is kind of senseless. It just doesn't. And what I told her was like, what it actually rewards is not football prowess or something. It's just perseverance. It's just still caring about it longer and more than other people in your league, which is that actually something we want to reward? Well, we want to reward it, because if we're here doing it, and we want to reward it because people, as I look in the camera, like you actually want to spend time with us, you actually like us. If you're still here, 46 minutes in, Dave. Before we go off the rails, anything else you want to share? I know you've got your platform with Alfredo. You guys are doing great stuff, and you're always like ways that people see what's on your mind. But now, while you're on the couch, is there anything else you want to say before we talk about other things than football?
Just the way that the NFL is transitioning right now, and I haven't seen many people talking about it. We have since 2020, every single year, we have seen a downtick in overall passing yardage per game by every single team. And a lot of people just chalk that up from the shell high coverage and said, this is just the way the NFL is changing. But now what we're seeing is this new wrinkle where tight ends are becoming the focal point of so many passing attacks. And you talk about the depth of the tight end position. And like when I'm looking at my rest of season tight end rankings, I've got a lot of guys that are like in the tight end 25 to 30 range that I'm looking at as weekly streamers. And that's because we are seeing so many teams just relying on 12 personnel now. Last year, not a single team was above 35% clip and willing to use 12 personnel. This year, we have 9 teams that are playing above a 35% clip. And that's because this is, I think, how you combat those shell high coverage. Instead of getting the ball to your wide receivers and allowing them to create after the catch, give it to the 6'7", 280-pound guy who can run through the entire defense. So it, for whatever reason, haven't seen a lot of people talking about this, but it's something that I've been paying close attention to. It seems like every week we're just seeing less overall passing volume and more passing volume funneled to tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how this is going to continue shifting over the next few years.
Yeah, why do you got to get Darnell Washington dancing visions in my head? Max Toscano, who I hope when I have on the couch
Yeah,
in the off
he's
season,
great.
and he's the tight end guy, and he
Mhm.
and he like Matt Waldman, like he can take really complex football stuff and make it simple enough as far as like why this is important. And he was the one who really got me excited about Darnell Washington's prospects because he just said like when you have a tight end who can block, you can do so much more. And teams are figuring out like AJ Barner is an interesting guy where like get a guy. It's so opposite of the way us fantasy types think. Like get a guy who can block and then see if he
Yep.
can figure out how to catch instead of
Mhm.
get a guy who can catch and figure out if he can block. So it's like you said, Dave, a lot of interesting stuff going on to the point where you might even have a tight end that you would flex, which is that's
Mhm.
insanity. Let's go off the rails a little bit insane. But it now the clock has turned back. We're really into fall. Halloween came and went. Did you have a good Halloween?
I did, yeah. We moved recently. We were in Fort Collins
Hmm.
for a while when we first moved out to Colorado, which is a very it's a college town. We lived in the Old Town neighborhood in a house built in 1886.
Ooh, nice.
A lot of kids partying in that neighborhood. Now we are in Colorado Springs. It's much more family friendly. It is
Okay.
a subdivision with a bunch of single family homes. So we have a stream of at least 100 kids
Oh,
that
right
come
on.
through on Halloween. So my wife did the Hocus Pocus, Sanderson sister,
Hmm.
did the orange wig and everything, got all dressed up. Kids absolutely loved it. And then we went to see a movie after that, which my days of going to a 10:15 showtime are probably behind me. Like I was tired for the entire weekend, but Begonia, fantastic movie if
Cool.
anybody's looking to challenge themselves a little bit.
Cool. It just made me think about like the midnight Rocky Horror Picture Show showings. Like you said, that we're getting old, but it's cool. And certainly, seeing the kids is great. And we were plague victims. Actually, Noah, it had he when he does costumes, he made his costume last year. He would be so embarrassed. He's like, he doesn't want me to tell anybody anything about him, but I'm so impressed with him. And this year, he did put together this amazing plague doctor costume, and we were the plague
Ooh.
victims. You know, and Beetlejuice was a plague victim. So I mean, it all fits together. So we turn the page from Halloween. The veil is thin. It's always thin here in New Orleans. The spirits walk among us.
Mhm.
And we get to fall and we get to Thanksgiving. When I say Thanksgiving, what does that mean? What conjures up in your mind when I say Thanksgiving?
Oh man, I don't want to get like too dark and depressing here, but I came from a very broken home, and a lot of people have like really good feelings
Mhm.
around the holidays, and I unfortunately do not. Lots of travel, different houses with strangers on the holidays. Who was married to who or dating who at this time that really kind of impacted my childhood. So I have been so lucky, married just the best woman in the world, and we have spent the last decade trying to create new memories and things
Yeah.
like that. And that's what we're doing now. We're taking grasp of our adulthood and we're making our own memories. So we haven't really done anything big for Thanksgiving. That's been a pretty quiet holiday for us since we've been together. With me being in football,
Right.
there's not too much we can do. But a couple of years ago, we bought a one of those huge deep fryers, and we've been deep frying a turkey every
Ooh.
single year, and that's a fun little tradition that we started. But really, for us, it's Christmas. That's what we look forward to, and we have a whole line of Christmas shows lined up that we're going to this year. We're going to see Trans Siberian Orchestra. We're
Oh yeah.
going, and that is actually before Thanksgiving, so we get in the Christmas spirit before Thanksgiving even hits. Like we'll be decorating the house this weekend, so Thanksgiving not a ton, but for us, as soon as Halloween is over, we turn the page to Christmas and get in the Christmas spirit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, Christmas, that winter festival, and I can identify with a lot of what you said, and especially about having a great wife who
Yep.
creates who you really feel like can replace the old idea you had of family with another idea, like we talked about before we came on the air, Dave, about um, childhood trauma and teaching your brain and your central nervous system that people can also mean safety, not not something that you have to be worried about. And Thanksgiving, by the way, you know what the big tradition is here in New Orleans on Thanksgiving is that people go to the races. People go to the horse races.
Love that.
Yeah,
Horse races?
horse races. That's it. Like that's what you
Nice.
that's what
That's fun.
that's what
Yeah,
you do in New Orleans on Thanksgiving, and among other things.
fun.
You go to the horse races, which is just another statement of like how unserious the city is. And it's fun, but Thanksgiving. Oh, geez, I don't want to third rail it. Even the origin of Thanksgiving as a holiday is kind of like.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
notice that like while we're celebrating Thanksgiving, like Canada is that's important, and like no, I don't know. Do they even celebrate Thanksgiving anywhere else? Like what it's
I don't think so. I think that's a North American holiday, yeah.
yeah, and then what it's commemorating. There's more than one way to look at it. But Christmas is there's only it's the winter festival of lights. It's about rebirth.
Mhm,
The sun gets as low on the horizon as it gets for 3 days, and then it
mhm.
starts to rise again. Sound familiar? Uh, so it's cool to feel that connection and know that there's that term syncretization. I had to make sure I say that slow, which is whenever people can take like one set of symbols and stories and mythologies and use it to tell their story. There's a ton of that
Mhm.
in New Orleans. There's a ton of that all over the world as all of our cultures have started to mix and create new cultures that have a lot of elements from the previous cultures. And Christmas, you don't have to. have accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. However, if you haven't, that's working out for you. I thank you. Hopefully, we all can embody a lot of the principles that Jesus Christ is associated with. Just as I'm an ethical and moral philosopher at heart, Dave,
Mhm.
and I don't care about the religious implications. I'm just talking about from the ethical and moral implications. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but there's something in Christmas. We saw it in like all. Here's a good one for you, since you're a Christmas guy. Favorite Christmas movie?
What a wonderful life.
Yeah,
Or I
it,
feel like
it's a Wonderful Life.
It's a
Yeah,
Wonderful
yeah,
Life.
yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Jimmy
it's a
Stewart.
Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the first time I saw that actually was just about 8 years ago. My wife and I were living in Chicago at the time, and we went to the Chicago Symphony and Orchestra, and they
Uh
had this
huh.
big screen behind, so they were playing the movie
Oh
on the screen while the
wow.
orchestra was playing the score, and I had
Oh,
never seen the movie before, and that final scene, I was bawling, like, just
sure.
a puddle of tears at the end of the movie. I didn't realize how good of a movie that was, so there's other ones I like, the Grinch, the Jim Carrey one is
Mhm.
is is fun, and there's a lot of fun movies, but, something about that, like, as we talked about, not the best memories from childhood around the
Mhm.
holidays, and I know a lot of people can commiserate with that. So I think if there's like one thing I'll say, it's like it's not too late to make
Never,
traditions late
never.
in your life. And my wife and I now we have all of these goofy traditions that we do. We go see a movie every single year for Christmas, some
Mhm.
sort of Christmas movie in a theater. We watch It's a Wonderful Life every single year. We get a permit and we drive 2 hours out into the mountains and we cut down our own Christmas tree in a forest and drive back with it and decorate it. And all of these things that, I didn't have these traditions as a kid, but I've made them in my adulthood. And now my wife and I have them together. We hope to share those with our kids someday. So just yeah, I think that's kind of the lesson that I've taken away. It took me because my wife's family, big Christmas family.
Oh
They do
yeah.
Christmas shows. They decorate the house. They've got the big vaulted ceilings in their house with like a 25-foot Christmas tree. And when I'd go over there, it just to me, I didn't really get it. And then something about this first time that we were with her family watching It's a Wonderful Life, and it just like hit me in the gut, and I was crying, and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna start accepting Christmas. There's no reason to be a Scrooge every year for the rest of my life.
Yeah. No, you touched on so much great stuff there, man. I mean, thanks for being real and sharing like your real life and self, because the idea again, um football's on Sunday, and we were talking about this before. There's a religious, it's filling a need that religion fills in some people's lives. And ritual shared experiences, like returning to different things, is so important for our souls. I think it actually gives our lives a sense of resonance and meaning by repetition. Football season, that's why football season's so meaningful too, because it's all these rituals and all these traditions. But you can, like, Tom Robbins said, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. You know,
Mhm,
you can create new associations, and it's not even the content of the tradition that matters. It's the care that you and the way you share it with people, and the spirit of the occasion, whatever it is. And it's, I think it's something that down here in New Orleans people just get and don't even have to, it doesn't have to be expressed. Like, the more things we do together, like, we're social animals, and we need to be part of things that are larger than ourselves. The current illusion of ego, and it's about you and what you did and your future. Like, there's other ways where you don't ever think of yourself as an individual. You're only part of groups, like a family, like a block, like a school. Like in New Orleans, it's like dancing crews and brass bands and crafting clubs and everything you could possibly imagine. It's about creating these shared experiences, or even for yourself, even a tradition that's just for you, but it gives your life resonance and meaning. It's just like, my life is pretty cool. It's pretty good to be me and return to this place and commemorate that I existed, and that was a good thing. I'm trying to tell myself that more, Dave. And certainly all of you make us feel that way. And that's something that I always want to make sure to say thanks, because we're really lucky, Dave, because we get to be validated by going to work. People make us feel like,
yeah.
hey, you have something to say that I'm going to listen to. And everybody just wants to be seen and heard. And you all give us that so generously, generously, so gracefully, as I'm making up words here. every week, every day as part of the Football Guys community. So thank you, as always, for giving us this platform. Thank you, Dave, for the time today. And everybody always, especially Dave and Alfredo, because everybody knows we are so classy.